Welcome to the live stream. This is Get Informed with Wajih. I'm Wajih Lion. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a very special one for you today with breaking down the Middle East for you with a very special guest, Professor Debra Shushan, a friend of the show at this point. Debra is an expert on U.S. Middle Eastern foreign policy, the former director of policy at J Street, former director at the Americans for Peace now, and the senior resident affiliate at the Georgetown University for the Center for Jewish Civilization. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's really a pleasure to be with you again. Thank you so much, and hi to everybody.
I heard you had a good vacation. That's why you were away from social media for a bit. I can't blame you. You're about to start your semester here soon a bit, I imagine.
Well, yeah, school year is getting ready to start, and and so it was a really nice break. I recommend, and I hope that everybody had some sort of a chance to take some kind of a break this summer because we all need to uh, you know, take care of some restorative self-care, family care. It was great to get to really spend quality time with my kids who are growing up all too fast. So I'm really grateful for the time.
Um, I really want to get into a specific topic this morning, and it largely will be covering Israel, especially that things have been escalating at the moment on few fronts. I think that have not been talked about. Then I would like to talk to you about the U.S. elections, which is also changing quite fast in the process.
Yeah.
But we have to start with the conflict between the U.S. and Iran and how that is impacting the Israeli relations between the United States and Israel. The relationship seems more complicated now than ever. Public opinion regarding U.S. policy toward the Middle East and Israel as at its lowest in the United States and internationally. What does that relationship now look like between the United States and Israel when it comes to the Iran war?
So I think you really have to separate two things. And that is, you talked about this in framing the question. You have the Trump administration's policy on the one hand, and then you have domestic public opinion on the other hand. And there is really a mismatch between these two things. Um, and there's some reason for that. I mean, maybe let's actually start. We can get into this further, but let's start talking about domestic public opinion vis-a-vis Israel. There was a poll that just came out yesterday or the day before. It's fresh out. I wish I had it up on my screen to give you some kind of specific numbers. Um, but and I could see what Jeff's face. It looks like he's like it, he's gonna pull it up. I can see him, as I speak here. So this Data for Progress poll just came out, and the findings are really, really interesting. I mean, in a nutshell, without giving you specific exact numbers, because I don't have them in front of my face, what you see is just dramatic change in public opinion vis-a-vis Israel within people who identify among voters who identify people who identify with the Democratic Party. I mean, the change is just vast. On the Republican side, looks a little bit different. There is a substantial minority um, who disapprove of Israel and U.S. policy vis-a-vis Israel, but it looks a lot different, right? It's still much smaller by percentage than what you see on the Democratic side. And that has something to do with, what we see in the election results and the differences we see in the primaries on the Democratic side versus the Republican side. Um, and then you really see, I think, you see this difference manifest as well vis-a-vis U.S. foreign policy by, of course, a Republican administration. And, you know, what we hear, and we hear it increasingly, and we've heard it for months now, is the Trump administration express its concern and its frustration, with Israeli policy, with Benjamin Netanyahu. But there have been no actual consequences in the same way. I mean, to be fair, it's similar to what we heard from the Biden administration, with frustration, but like no actual consequences, no use of leverage. And that's what we're seeing from the Trump administration now. So, I think in terms of the future of U.S., what Israel can expect from U.S. foreign policy, especially if there's a change in Congress, if the houses flip control to the Democrats, if the White House flips control in 2028, I think this will start to maybe manifest in terms of change in U.S. policy. But right now, I don't think we're really seeing that, right? I mean, we're seeing this change in terms of public opinion at the grassroots, and it's really not manifesting in terms of what we are seeing in any kind of concrete terms besides whining. That's not concrete terms in my view, in terms of what we're seeing in more concrete terms from the U.S. government.
This is a question I did not prepare, actually, just came up on my mind.
Great. Those are
Why
the best.
why is Trump so dependent on Kushner when it comes to Israel in particular? Anytime he wants anything done, he sends Jared over.
Okay. Two things. Let me start with a caveat to whatever, to what I'm about to say here, right? I do not have anything approaching a window into Donald Trump's brain. And the only way to answer your question with any reliability, right, would be able to actually see into his brain. And, so what I'm offering here is conjecture, right? I'm happy to do that, but just let's be very clear that it's
I
conjecture.
appreciate the honesty, yes.
Well, of course. I mean, I think anybody who claims to have, the answer to your question is just, is full of it, right? I mean, all we can do is conjecture. But look at the pattern with Donald Trump. And it's not just when it comes to Israel. It's not just when it comes to foreign policy. It's when it comes to absolutely anything and everything. He relies on people who are absolutely loyal to him, right? That's what matters above all else. He does not rely on people who are actual policy experts, who have experience, right? He relies on people, and especially those within his inner circle, folks like, you mentioned Jared Kushner, but let's also talk about Steve Witkoff, who also has, zero qualifications whatsoever for the high profile envoy roles that he's supposed to be playing vis-a-vis Iran, Gaza, Ukraine. I mean, he has no credentials, but he's a longtime business partner, associate, golf buddy, of Donald Trump. And that's what matters to him. I mean, we have seen a complete evisceration, in terms of actual expertise, especially, folk. I mean, I saw there is a trans woman who just wrote a piece in the Atlantic. I saw her interviewed on PBS NewsHour. And so she's really getting her voice out there, which is really important, I think. She's a former CIA uh, career person who has been, a high level intelligence official for years now. And she was, and the interesting thing about it is that she worked in the White House in Trump 1 and the first Trump administration. And even for, several months in the second Trump administration. And she was dismissed because she's trans and because they have an ideological agenda and because they don't care about expertise. Like, this is someone with serious years of expertise. They don't care about that. Right? I mean, and she's not the only person, of course, who has been dismissed. Other people have been dismissed because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
because of their identity. I mean, like, look at all of the women, people of color who have been denied promotions, who have been dismissed, right? Obviously, trans people as well, but not only. And also people who have just been dismissed because they're not, knee jerk loyalists to this regime. And so, I mean, that's what I would say, right? I mean, Jared Kushner is literally, he's, married to his daughter. He has proven his loyalty to Donald Trump over many years. It's interesting what I mean, as an expert on the Middle East, obviously, and as someone from that background, you the dependency on family, right? On family, people within the inner circle is something that, if you look at Middle Eastern regimes, I mean, I'm thinking here about like the Assads in Syria or, whether it's Gulf regime, obviously, which are dynastic family regimes in the Gulf, right? This is something that we're very, you and I are very accustomed to seeing in the Middle East. We're
Mhm.
not accustomed to seeing it in the United States.
We're starting
But
to.
that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. This is new in the United States. It's extremely problematic. It's extremely damaging, right? But that's what we're seeing here too. And I think for those, like us who have experience in other parts of the world with regimes that are not democratic, that are personalistic, that are based on patronage and family ties and loyalty and all personal loyalty and all of that. Like, we're seeing stuff that looks very familiar, but not something that, is endogenous to the US political system, if we want to put it that way.
I was having the same exact conversation with my partner yesterday, and he asked me the same exact question. He said, "Why does Trump trust Jared Kushner so much?" And my answer was exactly the same: trust.
Yeah.
But then I
Loyalty.
remembered, yeah, loyalty. But that thing goes
Mhm.
both ways, doesn't it? Because Jared is also very loyal to Netanyahu. The Kushner Netanyahu connection goes decades. Did you know that Jared used to give up his bedroom, childhood bedroom, so Netanyahu could sleep in it when he visits the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very long time relationship between the Kushner family and Benjamin Netanyahu, like you said, that goes back to, Kushner's boyhood. Yeah.
Which is kind of it's very very weird if I'm being honest, but that's not my business. Uh, let's talk about the situation. I mean, like the fact that the connect, like we have that guy that used to give up his bedroom for Netanyahu. Now he's the guy that is talking on behalf of the United States to Israel. That is to me a little weird. Just in terms of interest. Like, don't you think you would have conflict of interest at that point?
Do you really think that this regime cares about conflict of interest, would you? I mean
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But
I mean,
like,
look, let's be clear, right? I mean, yes, Jared Kushner has, a long time connection with Benjamin Netanyahu. But it's not just that. I mean, this man has extensive business interests, right, with Gulf countries, uh, who he's lobbying. I mean, who he's supposed to be negotiating with. Right? I mean, so it's much more than, there's much more of an issue here than just like long-term Kushner relationship with, the Israeli prime minister. It's that, you're dealing with an individual here whose interests are compromised, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there is no reason to believe. I mean, he has no official position. He was
Yeah.
never confirmed by anyone. He doesn't have a security clearance. In the first Trump term, he had trouble getting a security clearance. Now they're not even bothering with an attempt, right? So I mean, this is and this is a man who had, started his own whatever it is, venture capital fund, whatever the hell exactly it is, has raised billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and is trying to get more. And
Yep.
he's representing our country. And let's just add to that, right? We have a Congress that is supposed to engage in oversight, and they have completely abdicated. The Republican controlled Congress in both chambers has abdicated any responsibility to be conducting oversight. So, we have many, many problems that are going on here. We have corruption, and it's again not just Jared Kushner. The problem of corruption under the Trump administration goes way beyond Jared Kushner. We have corruption. We have lack of any sort of checks and balances. We have the dismissal of people with any expertise. And it's not just on foreign policy, right? Would you? I mean, let's look at, the Food and Drug Administration, right?
Oh
And
my
the
God.
impacts that we are all seeing in terms of like, I just saw last night, that now frozen blueberries, have the E. coli, and
Eggs.
I mean, everything. Jalapeno peppers is another thing that I've just seen. I mean, like everything, we have measles outbreaks. We have devastating impact on our economy. I mean, like every aspect of life for Americans is being deeply impacted by this administration's corruption, by the lack of any oversight by Congress. I mean, it's just, we're seeing it everywhere. And it's beyond, I mean, yes, absolutely. Are we seeing it in US foreign policy vis-a-vis the Middle East? We could talk about that, absolutely. But it is just such a bigger, broader phenomenon than that. And I think
Yeah.
it's worth noting that.
Yes. I agree. I agree. I agree. The thing that gets me the most, right, is that we had Dexter Ingram on Malcolm Nance's podcast yesterday. He said we need adults in the room. I thought at this point, kids in kindergarten would be doing a better job, if I'm being honest. The reality is that we don't have actual adults in the room. We don't have any experts anymore in the room. It's all about private interests. The Trump administration has privatized the federal government, so he puts his own people. He no longer sends the State Department to achieve anything. He sends Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff to achieve his close. Why? Because he wants to be the only voice when it comes to talk. What gets me about all of that isn't Trump, is that there are people who are adults in the room where we can start with the state, what in the Senate and in the House, that were elected to be leaders and chose not to. Same thing, world leaders. You would have expected that world leaders at this point show up some leadership. I'm not seeing any type of leadership from any of the people who are calling themselves leaders, and that's really concerning to me.
Yeah. Look, I shook my head at one point, and the reason that I shook my head is the following. You know, in Trump 1, I mean, there are some really interesting differences between Trump's first term and Trump's second term. You know, as horrible as Trump's first term was, and the fact that, every historian who was surveyed about this, as far as or certainly almost all of them, actual credible historians, said that Donald Trump in his first term was the worst president that we've ever had. That is nothing compared to Trump 2, right? At least you talk about adults in the room. In Trump's first term, there were still some adults in the room, right? People like Jim Mattis, just to, cite one example. There are other examples. I'm going to have Miles Taylor, inshallah, third time will be the charm. Miles Taylor is due to come on the debrief next week. I
Nice.
mean, he is, yeah, I mean, he's someone who, in the first term, as folks will probably know, I mean, he was chief of staff in the Department of Homeland Security, risked his job and career, by writing an anonymous piece in the New York Times and writing an anonymous book, basically blowing the whistle on the administration, talking about how he was trying to be the adult in the room on the inside, and there were others, and that was, I mean, as problematic as Trump 1 was, again, like, to be very, very clear, there were still at that point some adults in the room. When you say that there are adults in the room now, honestly, that's where I shook my head. I disagree. I think there are no more adults in the room. I mean, you look at, all right, let's look at, um, we've had reporting from the New York Times, for example, and others about exactly how the decision was made and who said what and everything else, right? Vis-a-vis going to war with Israel against Iran. There were a couple of people in the room, JD Vance, who kind of was like, I don't know. I have a little reservation. But, if you look at the quote, right, of what JD Vance exactly he said, it was like, well, here are my concerns, but Mr. President, if you decide that you are going to go ahead, we're going to be 100% behind you and we're going to sell this
Oh my God.
policy. And of course, that's exactly what he's done, right? I mean, that's not being an adult in the room. I mean, look at Dan Kane, right?
Yeah, I wasn't
Express me.
talking about the executive office. I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I was talking about Congress. I was
No,
talking about
no,
I none of them are adults anymore.
no,
None of them.
no, 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 no. I mean, we're talking in the Republican Party. Look, I'm sorry to say this. I mean, it's terrible for American democracy. We have only a two-party system, right? That's how it works here. And when
Yes,
one of
yeah.
the parties is no longer committed to democracy, sound policy that puts the American people and the Constitution first, and it turns into a cult of personality. I mean, there are plenty of Republicans who will groan about it, who will complain about it, who will talk, in private.
But won't do actually
They
something
won't
about it.
actually do anything because, in the end, what they are concerned about is their reelection. And they
Yep.
know that if they show the smallest hint, I mean, like, look at Bill Cassidy, right? Look at Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. Like, just to give you an example, right? Look, this is a guy, he's a doctor, right? This is a guy who is, expressed concerns over RFK Jr. and RFK's, policies and views
Uh-huh.
vis-a-vis vaccines. And he expressed those concerns. And when push came to shove, he still voted to confirm RFK, right? He made some noises, but when it comes to actually doing anything, he voted to confirm RFK, right? And
Same
guess
thing
what?
with the same thing with the new Trump lawyer.
Oh, you're thinking of Todd Blanche,
Yes.
the attorney general. But let me just go back to let me just finish up with my treatment of Bill Cassidy for just a moment,
Sorry.
right? So he votes for RFK Jr., right? To confirm him, right? And guess what? That wasn't good enough for Donald Trump. Right, because Donald Trump wants people who don't express any concern. It wasn't enough that he just voted to confirm RFK Jr. So Donald Trump went against him in the primaries. He supported another candidate in the primary. Bill Cassidy lost. He didn't even come in. He came in third and didn't make the runoff. Lost his seat, right? And guess what? Even after the guy lost his seat and everybody's like, okay, now he doesn't have to be beholden to Trump. At least for the rest of his term, we can expect him to act like an adult in the room. And you just mentioned Todd Blanche. It came to Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing to be our attorney general, for which he is manifestly unqualified, of course, right? And so everybody's like, oh, okay, maybe, Cornyn from Texas and Bill
Hmm.
Cassidy from Louisiana, they lost their seats thanks to Donald Trump supporting other candidates against them in their primaries. And they made a little noise and they got a totally non binding, meaningless agreement from Todd Blanche and they voted to confirm him. So don't tell me that's adults in the room, right? The Republican Party, I mean, and it's so problematic for even if you're a Democrat, even if you're a
Even
Democrat,
the Democrats,
even if
yes.
you're a Democrat, right? There are two parties in the United States. And if one of those two parties goes completely off the rails and becomes a cult of personality with people who are totally without spines, who only care about their own wealth, their own reelection, that is bad for all of us. And it is existentially bad for American democracy. And that's what we're seeing now. So I'm being a little blunt here, but
No, I actually agree with you. There is nothing I can disagree with your statements, honestly. I was just being a little cuter when it comes to my statement, but no, you're absolutely correct. I was gonna start with Israel, but since we're in the elections, let's get into the elections and then we'll go to Israel. The U.S. elections is approaching. How much do you think of foreign policy, especially the Middle East, will actually influence the everyday American vote at the moment?
um, here's what I would say about that as a political scientist. Um,
Hmm.
we know that what motivates Americans, uh, you know, first, last, and always is their pocketbooks, right? Their own personal economies. I mean, that is by far the most important thing. I think now, we know that there is, even in the Republican Party, a lot of anti war sentiment. Certainly in the Democratic Party for sure. Um, but I think it is more than anything for the most American voters, it is their own personal financial circumstances, which, to be clear, for most American voters is not going well. I mean, if
Hmm.
you're in the top 1%, you are doing phenomenally well. For the rest of us, no, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Even the millionaires.
I think if you're a
They're
millionaire.
complaining, like it's funny because Jon Stewart did a coverage way back in the day where he was doing a fake. He was covering a whole bunch of millionaires that were complaining that the trickle down economy is not working because they're trying to be billionaires, and they're seeing it up close, way closer than you and I. I'm not a millionaire. You're not. I don't know if you are, but we're not close to that corruption. I grew up close to that corruption, so I've seen some of it as a child.
Right.
Um, but now that like you see millionaires complaining, "Oh, trickle down economy doesn't get to me." You feel like you're like, "Come on, get over it. You're a millionaire." But in the same time, it proves the point that trickle down economy hasn't been working
Of
for decades.
of course, absolutely. But here's where I wanna sort of connect. I mean, and I wanna make another point here if I could that, again, sort of with my political scientist, historian, whatever sort of background, hat on. Um, the other thing I think to note is that we no longer have a draft, right? We haven't had a military draft in this country for decades. So there is a small number of people who are bearing the brunt uh, in terms of actually fighting this war, right? The number of people who are directly affected is small. And so for the rest of us, yeah, maybe we don't, a lot of people don't like the war in the abstract, don't like the concept of foreign war, but the main impact on your average American is on, our own pocketbooks. And so, to the extent that Americans like make that connection, as of course you and I and all of our brilliant viewers here do, right? We make the connection between the war in the Middle East and, the increase in oil prices and inflation and all of that. Like, and it does, impact us in terms of our grocery bills and our gas bills and all of that. Like, to the extent that Americans kind of make that connection, then yes, there's an indirect impact, I would say, of, US foreign policy and the war, but it is mediated through the more direct issue for Americans that is what motivates folks when they go to the polls of their own personal economies.
This is a little frustrating.
No, I know it's look, and can I just say one more thing? I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
say
yeah.
one more thing as like a weirdo outlier who, political scientist, academic who, has focused for many years on foreign policy. It has frustrated me just on a personal basis for many, many years that Americans, your average American, does not think about foreign policy when they go to the polls. Like, it's not even in, the top 10 things that they are thinking about when they go to the polls, right? And a reason that that is so frustrating to me. I mean, it's obviously partly because I think about and care about that a lot, and have chosen to focus my career on it. But it's also because the thing that the American president has the most direct control over is our foreign policy, right? And so, but I mean, do Americans even know that? I mean, sadly, like I've
What
talked
about
to
where
some.
most of the money is going? It's most of our money is going to foreign
No, it's not.
some
No, I mean,
military that's going foreign countries. No,
no, it's totally not. No, no, no. I mean, if you look at the U.S. budget in terms of foreign aid, it has always been extremely small, like not even 1%. And Americans often think that it's bigger than it is. It's actually quite small. Now, if you look at
wasn't
the
talking about
Pentagon,
the aid. No, no. Foreign policy decisions end up costing the United States money, not
yes,
regarding aid,
yes,
but regarding economic decisions, wars, whatever
yes.
it costs.
That's
That's what I was talking about.
Yes. Okay. Fair. Fair. I mean, that's obviously a much bigger expenditure. I mean, especially if you look at the Pentagon budget, which is, at this point, they're requesting $1.5 trillion, which is absolutely insane for a single year for the Pentagon budget, for a Pentagon that is just clearly failing. And, Secretary of War who has no idea what to actually do with that money. Right. So you're right. And there are obviously indirect impacts to the US economy for sure. Right. I mean, absolutely, that part is true. Um, but again, like, how many Americans understand this and, the role that the president plays in foreign policy? How many Americans understand the financial impacts of all of this and how it hits them in their wallets? Not nearly enough. And, I'm seeing here someone write in the chat, and they're exactly right. This is one of many reasons why this administration and fascist regimes in general attack education. They burn books, they, fire teachers, and, all of that. I mean, that's like mission number one in non-democratic fascist regimes, right? For good reason.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
keep the public ignorant.
Mm, they're good at it too. When I was actually interviewing Deborah Amos, to your point, it has nothing to do with this particular topic, but it sheds a big, light into what happens when you keep the people ignorant. She said most Israelis didn't see the Israeli war crimes in Gaza and Palestine. Israeli government purposely kept it out of the media. I don't know how much you agree with that, but just from that statement, I remembered her statement saying that.
She is first of all, I love Deb Amos. I had her, as I had her on the debrief. She's awesome. And I wanna have her back actually to talk, really focus in on Syria, which is her
She's so
expertise.
good on
Yeah.
Syria.
Yeah, so I wanna have her on to really focus, she knows more about Syria than I do. Um, and so, I wanna have her on to focus specifically on that. I would say on this, with all respect, to Deb, obviously, she's right and wrong, right? Um, she is right in the sense that, the Israeli media, she's absolutely right. The Israeli media, um did not cover, kept out of the media, very kept out of their reporting very deliberately, what was happening in Gaza, with a couple of exceptions, which are worth noting. I want to give a shout out here to Haaretz, Israel's liberal newspaper, its oldest continuously running newspaper. It is an essential source of information that operates with integrity.
What is it
Uh,
called again?
Haaretz. Haaretz. Haaretz is amazing.
Taras, Taras. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I rely on it extensively, and it has a liberal bent. They cover it's a lot of critical stuff, vis-a-vis what the government is doing. I mean, they cover the West Bank, not just Gaza, but, really serious coverage of the West Bank, and they're excellent, and they deserve a lot of kudos because, in the kind of regime, that Israel has, doing what they're doing isn't easy, and it's not without cost. And so they deserve a lot of props. The other Israeli outlet that I want to give a shout out to is 972, which also does excellent investigative reporting. It's a much newer outlet. It's a much more Israeli Palestinian joint venture, so it's really unique and
Cool.
yeah, 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 it's excellent. It's interesting because the reason that they call it 972, I believe, if I understand correctly, is because 972 is the country code, if you will, that covers both Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. So it's kind of a way of saying, like, we're not just Israel, it's like a joint Israel Palestine venture. They have amazing reporters that are both Israeli and Palestinian. They're excellent. They're excellent.
Oh, this is just Korean hearts or Japanese hearts.
I didn't know what that was. Excellent. So they're great. So like Haaretz and 972, follow them, support them, like amazing. But they are, of course, outliers, right? I mean, you talk about all of the major Israeli media outlets, they very, very deliberately did not have coverage of, what was going on in Gaza. So okay, so like that's the yes part where I agree with Deb, right?
Okay,
Like that's the yes. The no part is, I mean, come on. Like Israelis,
they're right there.
it's not even that. It's not even that, right? The vast, vast majority of Israelis speak English. They have access to international media. It's not like it's blocked for them. If they wanted to read American and international news sources that did cover this stuff, not well enough, of course, but nonetheless covered this stuff,
Uh-huh.
at least to some extent, it is available to them, right? And so the fact is, like, on the one hand, yes, Israeli media, except for, the couple of exceptions that I mentioned, deserves tremendous blame. And on the other hand, the Israeli public didn't want to know. I mean, either some segment of the Israeli public who, support the right-wing parties, um, you know, very, very sadly, like many folks were on board with the kind of, you could even call them genocidal statements that those, leaders within the Netanyahu cabinet were making. So some of them were fine with that. For Israelis who, many, many Israelis, though, without, I mean, there is a small segment of Israeli society, God bless, and some wonderful Israeli NGOs and organizations who, not only were aware of this, but strongly opposed to it and all of that. And, those are the people whose voices I elevate on the debrief on my podcast all of the time. We should know that they exist. That's super important. We should support them and their work. But, you have kind of the right wing, you have those great folks, who are doing the important work at great cost. And then you have many folks who are kind of in the middle who just like actively didn't wanna know. They
Mm.
could have had access to this information if they'd sought it out, but they really didn't want to. They, really preferred not to know. And so that's the other side I would give to what Deb had to say. So, yes and no.
Two things can be true at the same time. Uh, you are one of the best experts when it comes to politics of American Jewish community. How are the current events in the Middle East reshaping the priorities of the Jewish American voter?
Yeah, I mean, since October 7th, um, the impact on Jewish Americans and our community, and, we can talk about politics in a second, but intra-communal relations, in terms of I mean, there's always been conflicts and different opinions and, within the Jewish American community. That part isn't new, but the intensity of the disagreements and conflicts is, since October 7th, of a level that we have not witnessed before. So, I would say that on the one hand, and I think it's important in that regard to be very clear that, there is no one monolithic Jewish community, Jewish American community by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there's like a joke about, Jews that we make of ourselves, one Jew, two opinions, right? Like, not only do we argue with each other, but we argue with ourselves, right? Like, so I mean, there is right there. So I think it's really, really important to emphasize that this is not monolithic. Um, and, the impact on the community has been really profound. I mean, we see elements of the community that have gone overboard and doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on their insistence, for example, that, anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism, who have, I mean, look at APAC, which is
Mhm.
one organization, like to be very clear, that is one organization. And, certainly does not represent all Jews. And there are people who support APAC who are not Jewish, like just to be clear about all of that. who have, quintupled down, and obviously spent millions and millions of dollars on primary races. So you obviously have that dynamic, and it's important. Um, and at the same time, you have Jewish Americans, a substantial number. I mean, not a majority, not a plurality, but nonetheless a substantial majority, who are supporting candidates who are very critical of Israeli policy, who will use words like genocide. So like take Zoran Mamdani for one example, right?
Mhm.
Mayor of New York. Um, there was tremendous opposition uh, among elements of the New York Jewish community against Zoran Mamdani. There were rabbis who were, giving sermons from the pulpit, calling on their congregants to vote for Andrew Cuomo in the primary, which is like truly horrific for many reasons. This is a man who's like serially accused of sexual harassment, credibly so, right? And, for them, like that's the lesser of two evils vis-a-vis Zoran Mamdani, which, for many of us is incredibly problematic. So you
Mhm.
have folks like that, right? And then, the estimates are, and we don't know the exact numbers. There's no way to know the exact numbers. This is based on exit polling, which is unreliable, right? But the estimates, just to give us a vague idea, like, are that, a third of Jewish New Yorkers voted for Mamdani, right? Um, which is, not insubstantial. I mean, the other thing is there's fascinating polling that's been reported in a number of outlets. Benjamin Netanyahu has been very unpopular among Jewish Americans for a long time, and that has increased over time, including since October 7th. Zora Mamdani is like, has a major lead over Benjamin Netanyahu if you compare his favorability among Jewish Americans to Benjamin Netanyahu's favorability, right?
Mhm.
Just to get, and like that probably surprises a lot of people. But I think for a lot of Jewish Americans, that's probably not terribly surprising to know about our community, given the way that so many people feel about Netanyahu. I mean, there's not like vast support for Mamdani in our community, but he's still way more, there are folks who support him, and he's still way more popular than Zoran Mamdani. So it's created some really interesting dynamics within the Jewish American community. One of the races that I'm really watching very closely is in Michigan, the Senate race.
Same.
Yeah, the Senate race with with Abdullah Sayed.
Abdul.
I'm thinking of his full name. Abdurrahman Mohammed Sayed, right? Like, so yeah.
My given name is Abdurrahman.
I know. Yeah. 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 It's a beautiful name. And by the way, like, hold on, I realized I didn't plug in my phone. Um, I sorry, this is such a digression, but I hope you'll permit me, Wajih. Like
Absolutely.
this is a total digression. Like when I first heard of this dude, I was like, wait a minute, his name is Abdul? That makes no sense. Because you know better than I do that, like, Abdul is, like, not really an Arabic name, right? It's, like, part of an Arabic name,
That's
right?
right.
It's always Abd el something, Abdul Rahman,
The
Abdul
servant. So God has 99 names in Islam, and usually it's kind of a blessing to name your children after one of God's name by naming the child as a servant of one of his names.
Exactly right. And abd, right, is servant. Abd el, right? So servant of, and then you put one of God's names. So Abdurrahman, Abdulaziz, like, you could give me lots of other examples, right? And so I was like, dude, this guy's name is not Abdul. That's really weird. Um, and so when they started after he got the nomination and the Republicans were like, his name is Abdurrahman Mohammed Al Saeed. I was like, of course it is. And that's an
It is.
awesome name. And we should all say it. We should all learn to pronounce it. And we should all think it's amazing that we may have a Muslim and Arab American, of which there are none in the Senate, and there's never been a Muslim in the US Senate. Like, we should embrace that. And as a Jewish American, I want us to be in front of the line, right? Of embracing the diversity that is the United States, that has enabled, sorry, I'm going on a little rant here on my soapbox, but that has enabled the Jewish American community to flourish in this country like we have flourished nowhere else. And that is, predicated on the diversity of this country, on the representation of all of the amazing, we're a minority group, all of the amazing minority groups that make up this country. And it makes me, meshugana, which is Yiddish for crazy, when I see that there are, look at APAC, which spent, at least $30 million going against him in the primary. And then, okay, so I want to just say a little bit more about him before I move on. So, now,
What do you think of Abdul Said?
what do I think of him? I mean, so as you know, I hosted him on the debrief.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say this. I mean, like you're asking me personally, right? Um,
Yes.
I personally am progressive. When I go and actually let me note this, because this also might be surprising to at least some of the folks who are tuning into us. If you look at polling of Jewish Americans specifically, I can point you to examples if you're interested. And look at the top issues that motivate Jewish Americans. Israel is, if you look at the top 10, Israel's going to be at the bottom of the top 10. Yeah, it's not. I mean, like people that, now, is there variation? Of course. Like, are there some people, some minority who like, Israel first and last and always? Yeah, there are some. But look at the breadth of the Jewish American community, and it barely cracks the top 10, right? We are Americans. We are Americans. What was the top? Do you know what I'm going to ask you? I'm going to ask you, what you? I'm going to ask you,
Mhm.
what were the top issues that were motivating Jewish Americans going to the polls in 2024 to vote for president?
The economy?
The economy's up there. I mean, it's like, it's in I think it's maybe like number 3. Of course, it's up there like it is for other.
US-Israeli relations?
No, I'm telling you, that's like maybe number 9 or 10.
Oh, for them, not for the rest of the Americans. That's specifically for Jewish
No, I'm
Americans.
talking specifically about Jewish Americans.
Oh my God, that's actually a big deal. Okay, now I'm just real. I thought you were talking about for the rest of America. No.
No, no.
Oh my God, I'm just getting this at the moment. What is their number one?
The number one issue for Jewish Americans in 2024 was, wait for it, democracy. Yep. So, right, democracy was number one. Uh, you know, I think I want to, climate is up there for Jewish Americans. The economy is up there like it is for all Americans, right? Um, ahead of Israel, you're going to have things like abortion rights, women's rights, abortion rights. You're going to have gun control is going to be up there. I wish, damn it, I wish I had the poll results right in front of my face. Um, but Israel is like 9 or 10, right?
It's crazy.
But
That
this should not be
I
surprising.
mean that's kind of stereotypical of me, right? But I guess everyone would have thought, well, here's the thing, because you have APAC and is being presented as a local entity that represent the local Jewish Americans, but I feel like it's more like a foreign lobby in the US.
Well, we can talk about that, but the foreign lobby. But look, let me emphasize, that Jewish Americans are Americans.
That's right.
We are Americans first and foremost, no question about it. Our loyalty is to this country. We are Americans. Guess what, Wajih? If we wanted to be Israelis, we could be Israelis. I could get
Uh-huh.
Israel tomorrow under the law of return, make Aliyah, and become an Israeli citizen. And that is true of all of my fellow Jewish Americans. And we choose not to. This is our home. We choose to be here. And the issues that motivate us when we go to the polls, when we vote, are domestic issues, like is true for all other Americans. And let
Uh,
me get to APAC,
yeah.
and let me
Yes,
get
please.
to ADL. And I'm sorry, I'm getting like all worked up and I'm yelling. Let's breath, calm down. Okay.
Okay.
These organizations I
Mhm.
not only disagree with on a policy basis, which of course I do, they are doing a tremendous disservice to the Jewish American community by making our fellow Americans think that, like you did, and you're not alone, Waji. You ask many other Americans, like, what do Jewish Americans care about more than anything else? A lot of people will say Israel. And, a lot of that is due to the fact that there is this, you know, organization that will take millions of dollars from Republican mega donors and feed it into Democratic primaries, making it look like, people extrapolate from APAC to the Jewish American community writ large. And they do that to all of our peril, literally physical danger,
Mhm.
when it comes to things like anti-Semitic attacks. I I I think you can tell I can't say this with
This is
clear
very frustrating for you
passion, and you can see it is intensely frustrating for me. And I'm
because
not
it is putting Jewish life on the line. Like, we don't want to see Jewish lives getting hurt. We don't want to see anti-Semitism. I am so against it. But I don't know if you know that. Are you familiar? There's even an account on Substack called Anti Zionism is anti-Semitism. Is is Zionism at this point moral, and is Zionism creating a danger on the Jewish community internationally and in the United States?
okay. You know, I don't, and this is like a whole Pandora's box of a question, right? Personally, I don't. I mean, a lot of people, we hear a lot of people speaking all the time about Zionism. I do not find this the most fruitful, uh,
Conversation.
line of discussion and I mean, look, I'm not. It's totally fine that you ask this question, right? Um, another, again, I'm, relying on polling and I wish I had all of this stuff immediately at my fingertips. But there was a really interesting study that came out this year, months ago, that asked Jewish Americans about their identification with, it was very interesting, Zionism, anti Zionism, not, whatever. And I believe a majority or plurality of Jewish Americans don't want to be identified with either Zionism or anti-Zionism, right? It's not even like I mean, there are some who do, obviously, right? There's a
Yeah.
relatively small percentage who strongly identify as anti-Zionists. It's significant. There are still a significant chunk of Jewish Americans who identify as Zionists, but I believe it's a plurality or even a majority of those of us who don't find this to be a, me- a meaningful term, a term that describes who we are. This is something like, honestly, I could, requires a much bigger treatment than I'm giving it right now. And so, what I would say, and then let me cede the floor back to you, like, it is, from my perspective, questions about Israel and U.S. foreign policy toward Israel and, opinion of various groups toward Israel and all of that sort of thing.
Mhm.
That's important. That's totally legitimate. I just and I'm not saying it's illegitimate to ask about Zionism, whatever. It's not the most meaningful, I think, way to approach this issue. It's not the most illuminating way to approach this issue. If that makes sense, let me throw it back to you.
Well, the reason I asked that question is I saw many people say, I am with Israel. I stand with the Jewish people, but I do not stand with Zionism. That is something I have seen. That I support the Israeli government, I support the Jewish people, but I don't support Zionism. The other thing is that there is
I don't know what that means exactly.
I don't know what that means.
I
I'm
don't know,
just
and I
like,
would like someone who's saying that, like, the only way to know. I was just talking about this yesterday on my podcast. I mean, like, the only way to know something is to just ask somebody, like, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean, fine. People say all kinds of things. That's fine. Personally, I don't know exactly what that means.
fair enough, fair enough. But the other part for that question is that when you have a government, right, that is basing its policies domestically and foreignly on the Zionism and is making it as the justification for it, it becomes a matter of questions for a lot of people because they don't understand it. They don't know why, but they want to know where they should stand morally on that because they keep getting labeled as anti Semitic for criticizing Zionism or aspects of it. So that's why the question keeps coming up of the morality. People are being labeled as anti-Semite, and being an anti-Semite is immoral in many ways. So the question becomes, where I want to be a good person, where am I supposed to stand on this issue?
Yeah, and these are exactly the kinds of things that we talk about on the debrief all the time, and I keep telling people that I should probably really teach a course because this is not something that can be, like, treated in, part of a conversation or a whole conversation about Zionism and what it has meant historically and the different variants of it and what opposition to it has looked at like over time and all of that. I mean, like, let me just give a couple of responses to what you just said. Now, the Israel first of all, I mean, you could tell from what I just said a second ago, Zionism doesn't mean just one thing. It doesn't today,
Yes.
and it never has, right? And that's a large part why I feel like it would be hopefully a service to teach a course on this stuff. So it doesn't mean one thing. It never has meant one thing. And at the same time, right, for the Netanyahu government, there is something specific that it means. And we can talk about that, right? For this Israeli government and other right wing Israeli governments and a lot of right wing Israelis, Zionism of a right wing, sometimes a religious variety, um, you know, means things like, um, first of all, that Jews have to have a demographic majority, that Jews um, have a position of superiority. I mean, there's 20% of Israel's population, and here I'm talking about like internationally recognized Israel within the Green Line. Roughly 20% of it, even a little bit more than 20%, are Palestinian citizens of Israel. There's a nation state law that was passed in 2018 that institutionalizes a particular vision of Zionism and that institutionalizes, I mean, it's always been de facto true on the ground in Israel, but that institutionalizes in a basic law, and Israel doesn't have a constitution. So basic laws are the closest thing that Israel has, actually institutionalizes Jewish superiority. It downgraded, Arabic used to be one of Israel's official languages. Hebrew and Arabic were the official languages. It downgraded Arabic so that it was no longer an official language, right? Just to give you a sense. And extremely important if you're talking about the nation state law. It applied not only within Green Line Israel, but in all the territory under Israel's control, right? So, including the occupied Palestinian territories. So, this is a law of tremendous importance. And this does get to the question. Again, Zionism doesn't mean just one thing, but it does mean one thing for the Israeli right wing, right? And this is now has been enshrined into Israeli law. And so that's why when I said, Wajid,
It's very much like saying Sharia doesn't mean one thing for Muslims.
yeah,
I think that I like you're like to me, this is an important answer. Like, it's genuinely like it gives me a lot of insight because you could ask someone who's a Muslim supremacist about Sharia, and all of a sudden they're like issuing executions for Muslims, not even like non-Muslims. And then you could meet someone else who's like a liberal, cute Muslim, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, LGBT community is amazing. Yeah, they can be a part of the Muslim community." And like it's a totally
views
different.
on women too, right?
So yeah, that is actually very, very revealing. But because Israel is run by a far right government that has a very specific interpretation of Zionism and they want to implement that, now the world has a misconception of what Zionism is.
Uh, but so like let me just return to what you said before, right? Remember when you said you've seen people on Substack or whatever say, I support the current Israeli government, but I'm not a Zionist. That's why I was like, I don't know what that means. Because the current Israeli government has, this very right wing particular conception of Zionism. So what does it mean to support that and not consider yourself a Zionist? Like, I don't know what that means. Right. So like that's why I said that. Um, yeah. So, I think look, we have to be specific. I know it's hard, right? I mean, like this is all I can't require everyone to, I mean, this is stuff that obviously I've spent, you know, a million years. Okay, I'm not quite that old. I just feel like I am, learning. And I can't expect everyone to, people have
I don't know if you know, but a light bulb just went on my in my head
right.
while you were
And
explaining that.
yeah, 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 yeah. So, I hope that this is, I appreciate that it's illuminating for you. That's awesome. And I hope it is for other people too. And, this is what I'm trying to do on the debrief all the time is, kind of add some complexity and some, God forbid nuance and all of that and while at the same time still being very, hard hitting where it's appropriate.
I still have a few more questions. I don't know if you have extra time, but before I have you answer that question, please take a second, click on my name. It will drop down. You'll see Professor Debra Shushan. Subscribe to her right now. Her debrief is really important. I don't know if you know, she interviews some of the most intelligent, most powerful people in the United States, and her opinion actually matters. She deserves your time. She deserves your money. Substack algorithm works based on paid subscribers, and she needs more paid subscribers to pick up. please take a second to give her your time and money.
That's so kind of you. Thank you so much, Wajia. And of course, the same right back at you. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Um, do you have extra few minutes to
Yeah,
answer
yeah, yeah.
some questions?
Let's go. Yalla.
Okay, yalla, yalla. I'll be fast. The
Okay.
situation between yalla means let's go.
Yes, yes.
Israel and Gaza. What is the biggest hurdle for preventing lasting ceasefire? Because it seems like every ceasefire fails since day one, and the release of the hostages today.
Um, I think the there are many obstacles. The policies of the Netanyahu government are a tremendous obstacle. The fact that um, the U.S. government is unwilling to use leverage vis-a-vis Israel, and the U.S. government is obviously the strongest outside party who could do that. I would add, though, that there are other parties who could impose consequences if they wanted to. The European states certainly could, as Israel's largest trading partners, with a important trade agreement with Israel. There are consequences that they could impose. There are consequences that, UAE, for example, that is a, key Israeli ally, and other Arab states could also impose. But the U.S. is first and foremost. And I look, what we saw, what we've seen is that um, the Trump administration uh, developed its own, so-called peace plan with the Board of Peace, yada yada. It's extremely problematic. It has been extremely problematic in many ways. And of course, I did a program on the debrief about this months ago when it first came out with Zaha Hassan, who is one of the, foremost Palestinian
I
American.
actually saw that interview. It was
Oh,
pretty good.
oh, amazing. I'm so glad. Yeah. And Zaha is totally amazing. And we really broke down why that agreement, just in and of itself, is extremely problematic. And, it was made without any Palestinian input, any, right? It was certainly made without, the blessing of Hamas, from whom it demanded disarmament, right? But even also without other Palestinians who absolutely, vital that they be included. Israel, the Netanyahu government did not really accept it in any meaningful, committed way. They wiggled around, but like they were never committed to it, because that agreement, yes, it requires Hamas's disarmament, but it also requires Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, which is something that this Israeli government, would never commit to, right? Never. Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. In fact, since the plan was acceded to, and since the UN Security Council blessed it in a Security Council resolution, which it never should have done, Israel has increased and not decreased the percentage of the Gaza Strip that it controls, up to about two-thirds, or 70%. Benjamin
Wow.
Netanyahu announced to his base that he was going to increase the percentage to 70% control of an already tiny Gaza Strip, right? Pushing the Palestinian population of Gaza into, a tiny, tiny sliver of territory, right? Um, and so, very recently we saw Benjamin Netanyahu come out and say that Israel is rejecting, um,
Straight up.
straight up, right? This time they actually came out and said it, right? Straight up, we reject this. We're not going to withdraw. The pretext is we don't believe that Hamas is going to disarm. We can't pull out until Hamas fully disarms. Hamas, of course, would never disarm while Israel is occupying Gaza, right? So, like, all of that is a non-starter. And so, and so then what does the Trump administration do? we have leverage. Do they put their foot down and say, no, no, this is the Trump peace plan, and, you will either go along with it or there will be material consequences? Of course not. And we just saw this, so then you talk about, Jared Kushner is dispatched to Israel and has a 4-hour meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. And, the lovely part about this is that after the 4 hours, he says, and he met with Hamas too, which was interesting. He comes out of this and he says, progress has been made, and he makes some positive noises. And the Israeli government issues a 3-line statement in English in which it says, the meeting was good, whatever. And then in Hebrew, they issue a much longer statement in which they're like, "No, there's no way we're pulling out." And it's so, and what's really funny to me about that, because if you followed Israel Palestine for any length of time, there have always been allegations made of the Palestinians, of Yasser Arafat in particular. There were always allegations made that he would say one thing out of one side of his mouth in English, and he would say something totally different out of the other side in Arabic, right, for his Palestinian audience. And that's exactly what the Israeli government is doing. And they're doing it without any sort of consequences. So, I mean, I guess, what I would say to your question is that the utter failure of, a genuine ceasefire in Gaza, of, the move toward Hamas's disarmament, Israel's withdrawal, the vital need ASAP for reconstruction of Gaza. I mean, there are many reasons why that's not happening. Of course, it's always, multifactorial, many factors. And, if I had to put one at the front of that line, I would say it is the policy of the current Israeli government and, the Trump administration, their policy about Israel when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Lebanon, when it comes to Syria. There was some interesting news, right, about Israel's bombing of a base in Syria, and the Trump administration reaction to this that just came out within the last few days. The Trump administration approach is to basically say, we're very disappointed, not to do anything concrete, and then basically say to, the Syrians or the Lebanese or whomever, like, listen, there really isn't going to be any progress till after the Israeli election. So, like, just hold tight and let's see what happens, right? And we know, I mean, and that's important. We know that Israeli government policy is predicated 100%, not 99, 100% on the upcoming elections and Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition's, um, you know, domestic political needs and calculations vis-a-vis the elections.
Mm.
And, and again, there are no consequences. There's nothing on the other side. If there are no consequences, nothing to consider on the other side, then, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, wow. Um, there is a developing story that is not being talked about. Well, it's being talked about that we haven't talked about yet. The siege that's happening in the West Bank. Many, many villages in the West Bank are being with thousands of Israeli settlers. There's a combination of stuff happening. Thousands of Israeli settlers armed are going to villages in the West Bank and occupying new territory, and sieging whoever is refusing to leave their homes, stealing their livestock, killing the livestock, burning the trees, whatever they could do to put pressure on them, cutting the water, cutting the electricity. And then the Israeli government is saying that they are there to prevent the settlers from expanding. But to statements from the locals, they're saying that they're seeing the Israeli soldiers actively supporting the settlers and with the siege. Could you help us break what's happening down and why this is happening at the moment?
Sure, I can. And, this is something, of course, that I cover all the time on the debrief. Sorry, I just have to mention that. But I mean, also beyond the debrief, I mean, this is when I was working at progressive Jewish organizations that focus on U.S. foreign policy on Israel Palestine. The West Bank was the bulk of what I focused on these, as a policy and government relations person who lobbied Capitol Hill, right? So this is my bread and butter in terms of both like what's happening on the ground and US foreign policy concerning this. So I think first of all, let me say I think you summed it up really well. I think you summed up the situation, at least the basic contours of it. I think you did a really good job. So, mabruk. Uh,
Thank you.
I'm learning this. This is new for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mabruk, you did a really good job. And what can I add to this? I mean, I'll add to this like the latest thing that's gotten news coverage, like the specific example of this that has recently gotten news coverage is what's happening in the Palestinian village of Qusra.
Hmm.
It's gotten coverage specifically because a particular home of a Palestinian family is being like literally besieged. Cut off of food and water. A kid in there that needed medical help that couldn't get evacuated for medical help. The reason that it got coverage, whereas other stuff that is equally horrific has not gotten coverage, is why? Because this family is Palestinian American. And so, the US dimension of it actually got it coverage. And US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, about whom I could easily do an entire podcast and have much, much to say about it, actually tweeted something specifically about that incident in Qusra because because we're dealing with American citizens. Normally, he wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't, I mean, he's 100% with the settlers, right? In any
So
crime.
the only reason he said that these Israeli settlers are terrorists and they will be banned from coming to the United States if they continue to do whatever they do was because these are American Palestinian citizens.
Of course. Of course.
Did you see that?
No, and
Did you see some of the relatives of the members who are being besieged, um, who are American citizens, are flying back with their American flag to put the flag on the houses?
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's happened, and I talked about this. Sorry, I keep alluding to episodes of the debrief. I apologize, but I did an episode like what was it last week? I've lost all sense of time. I think it was last week, with Dahlia, who is oh my god, I can't believe I forget her last name. I'm a terrible person, but also I'm a middle aged woman who has a terrible memory. Anyway, we who's a Palestinian American journalist and absolutely amazing. And we talked about exactly this. And it was really interesting to speak with her because she is Palestinian American. She is a US citizen who lives in the West Bank, right? And there's a particular village, which we talked about quite a bit. There's a particular village in the West Bank called Turmusaya.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting. If folks want to hear more about this, go and check out this podcast. But it's a very interesting, unusual, right, atypical village, because a majority of the Palestinian residents of this Palestinian village are U.S. citizens. And they're actually very well off compared to the rest of the Palestinian population because they made money in the United States. right? And many of them, go back, they take the money that they made, and so, many of them will go back and retire. They want to, retire to the West Bank, or they want to have a second home in the West Bank, or whatever it is. They actually, they have like big, impressive homes in this, town of Tormosaya, where majority of them are American citizens. And Delia was talking about exactly this, that, they are putting up American flags on their homes. Thank you, Emma. Dalia Hatuka. Thank you. She just put it in the chat to help out my, middle-aged woman, terrible memory. Dalia Hatuka. She's absolutely amazing. Follow her. I love her. Um, and she talked about how they are putting up these American flags as like talismans to try to protect, like we are American citizens, settlers don't attack us. And the really, and and after talking with Dahlia, actually, or maybe no, it was probably before preparing for my discussion with Dahlia and doing a little bit of research on Tor Messiah, I came across a really interesting article, probably in the Guardian, where, they were talking about this dynamic. One thing that doesn't probably get a lot of media coverage, I don't know if you know this, would you? But, a significant, not a majority, but a like substantial percentage of uh, of Israeli settlers, and, particularly like ideological and sometimes violent Israeli settlers, are Americans, right? Who, go to Israel Palestine for ideological reasons, right? And so, in this Guardian piece, they talked about like there was one of the Palestinian Americans in Tormos Aya noted like these are other Americans who are doing this to us. And if we were in the United States, they could never do something like this to us. But of course, here they can do it with impunity. And, to your point, um, they can do it with impunity because the Israeli government does nothing, because the IDF is, the Israeli military I mean, their whole mission in the West Bank is to protect settlers, never to protect Palestinians.
Mhm.
And, and here I want to really highlight um, Ro Khanna, who I also had on the debrief. And within a week of when I had him on the debrief, he didn't tell me he was going to do this, but of course they don't talk about these things. Um, Within a week of his being on the debrief, he went to the West Bank, um, did something that, to my knowledge, no other U.S. member of Congress has ever done, which was actually to go on a Palestinian led tour. He went to the West Bank.
That's big deal.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal. It was a huge deal.
That's a
Got a
big
lot
deal.
it was a huge deal. And actually I spoke with I'm sorry, I keep talking about the debrief. I apologize. But
You do need to apologize. Please talk about the debrief as much as you are.
came back, after he came back, I had on the debrief the executive director of a really important Israeli human rights organization called Breaking the Silence. Super, if you guys haven't heard about it, it is one of my favorite. I love Israeli human rights organizations. Breaking the Silence is one of my very favorites. It is an organization of former Israeli soldiers who are basically whistleblowers. I mean, who come out of the Israeli military and testify about what they did in the occupied territories in order to uphold the occupation. And it's an amazing organization. So I had on the executive director of Breaking the Silence. And the reason I did that is because he accompanied Ro Khanna for at least a portion of his trip. And he was with Ro Khanna when Ro Khanna's van was stopped by armed Israeli settlers who were then backed up by the Israeli military. There were soldiers who came, according to Ro Khanna, the aide that was with him, the head of Breaking the Silence who was with him, who, spoke on the debrief. According to all of the Israeli government claimed, and the only reason, Waji, that this got cut, this happens to Palestinians, every
Oh,
single day, multiple times a day, all the damn time. But the only reason that this got media coverage is God bless Ro Khanna. It happened, and he, was all over it, and it got in the, in the U.S. media, in the international press. And so the Israeli government had to actually respond to it, which they never, otherwise do. And they claimed that the Israeli military, diffused the situation and dealt with the settlers and blah, blah, blah. But according to Ro Khanna and the head of Breaking the Silence, whatever, who were actually there, like the soldiers came, they were like smoking with the settlers, like they were part of preventing Ro Khanna from going anywhere. Like, they were part of the whole thing. And of course, if Ro Khanna had been a Palestinian, things would have gone way more poorly than they actually did. So, his what he did by going to the West Bank and then his testimony about everything that happened, as well as the head of Breaking the Silence, who took video during what happened, and he shared the video on social media, and then has spoken on the debrief and other places about it. Has helped get the word out and has been really, really important. So going back to your initial question, like in the bigger picture, like taking a bigger picture view, we talk a lot about Gaza when we talk about Palestine, and we should. Of course, we should talk a lot about Gaza. What happened there and what continues to happen there is horrific, and we should talk about it. But what is happening in the West Bank is horrific in a different way, but it's also absolutely horrific. It's terrible for Palestinians, for anyone who actually does care about Israel and, its long-term interests. It's absolutely terrible for Israel as well. What these lawless, horrific settlers, which are a much bigger problem. Netanyahu has gone on, he did an interview with Dana Bash on CNN where he downplayed all of this. And he said, it's 150 hoodlums and we deal with them. Bullshit. It's not 150, errant youths. It's a much bigger problem. It is, has a huge impact on life in the West Bank. It, as some Israelis with any sense will say, it is dramatically increasing the possibility that there will be another devastating outbreak of violence that will, of course, be terrible for Palestinians and Israelis as well. And so, what I would say is that anyone who actually cares really about Israel's well-being, as I personally do, should absolutely oppose what Israel is doing in the West Bank. It is horrific all around for Palestinians, for Israelis, for regional stability, for politics in the United States. Let's think about the way that October 7th and its aftermath has upended and remade American politics and created tremendous intercommunal dissension in American society. It has huge impact all around. And it is something that the Trump administration obviously is not going to do anything about. Mike Huckabee, evangelical Christian, 100% in favor of Israeli annexation of the West Bank. He sure as hell is not going to do anything about it. And it's a disaster all around. That's all that can be said about it. It's an unmitigated disaster.
The latest update about Israel was its current conflict with Turkey.
Mhm.
Are you familiar?
Mhm.
Did
Yeah,
you see Israel attacked an air base in Syria?
I
The
posted about it.
Turkish
Yeah.
the Turkish military was planning on using the Air Force base for their own base.
Mhm.
Now they sent their own batteries in. So that's something just to keep an eye on. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
Sure. I'll say I won't speak at length as much. I'll just say a couple of quick words on that. Yes, this is important. And I want to put it in a broader context. Um, Part of the reason why this is especially concerning to me is that, you know, unfortunately, the way that, this Netanyahu government, but not only, right? Other, like I'm thinking of you, Naftali Bennett, an anti-Netanyahu member of the Israeli opposition who is nonetheless right wing, right? The way that they deal with Israel's problems and situations and whatever is always to find an external enemy, right? And obviously, it's the Palestinians and it's of course Iran and it's da, 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 da. The next
Qatar and
one is Turkey.
Turkey.
The next one and Hezbollah, and the next one is Turkey. So if you look at and I posted this in a note on Substack a couple of days ago. There's a huge Likud party, that's Netanyahu's party, campaign banner on the size of a huge building, I think in Tel Aviv. Maybe there are multiple of these banners, probably. Um, and it shows the enemies of the Israeli state. And it says in Hebrew, they want Netanyahu to lose, don't let them win. There were four people in that photo. Wajif, can you name the four people in that photo?
Mushtaba. Uh, oh my God. Hassan Nasrallah or
Not Hassan Nasrallah, but the current head of Hezbollah. Hassan
oh,
Nasrallah, right?
let's think.
So Iran, Hezbollah.
Al-Houthi.
Nope.
Close.
You're not even close. No, you're not close.
Oh, Saudi Crown Prince? No.
No, 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 no.
Uh, Qatar? No.
That's a good guess. That's a good guess. Qatar is a good you're right. It's not Qatar, but it is a good guess because Qatar has been greatly vilified by the Israeli government, even though Netanyahu facilitated the
Rajab Tayyip Erdogan.
what?
Rajab Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan.
Yes. 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 So, and that's important to what we're just talking about, right? That Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is among the pantheon of the enemies. And you got to guess number four. Number four is really important. You're never going to guess it, though. If you don't know, if you haven't seen it, you're never going to guess it.
I don't know. No, I have no idea.
You ready for this? You
Tell
sing
me.
Zoran Mamdani.
What?
Would I lie to you? Uh huh. Uh huh.
Oh my God. Excuse me for laughing this bad, but damn.
Iran,
Okay.
Hezbollah, Turkey, and Zoran Mamdani. I'm not lying to you. I would not lie to you. And you can look at just go to my Substack feed. I posted the photo like 2 days ago or something. So you can see this on my Substack feed. Um, yeah, absolutely. So these are the enemies of the state, according to the Likud party. The Israeli media is totally 100%, the captured Israeli media, with the exception of Haaretz and 972, as I mentioned, right? But the Israeli media is totally on this. They have totally, totally vilified Mamdani in particular. But let's go to Erdogan for just a second because you were asking me about Turkey. I mean, it is really important and significant in terms of like, the labeling of the next enemy after, Yahya Sinwar, right? And, the head of Hezbollah and Iran,
Hassan Nasrallah, yes.
right? And now it's Mamdani, and now it's Erdogan, now it's Turkey. And that is really, and that brings us to the context of the specific incident in Syria that you're talking about, where, there is a Syrian-Israeli agreement in place, right? That is supposed to, even though Israel occupies portions of southern Syria, there is an agreement that's in place between Israel and the Syrians. Israel violated that agreement with this bombing that you spoke about at a Syrian base. Israel said that the reason that it did it was for self-defense because the Turks were going to move in, but they hadn't. So this is like, they get to do whatever they want because they can claim it's self-defense preemptively. I just posted this morning on my Substack feed. Look at my Substack feed. I just posted this morning. There's a piece, and what I did was I posted a photo from a piece written by Barak Ravid, who's an excellent Israeli journalist who works for Axios. And it covered the U.S. reaction to all of this, right? As you know, I'm sure very well, Wajih, Trump has been cultivating a very close relationship with Ahmed Sharia, the
Mm-hmm.
new head of Syria. The Trump administration, did not want Israel to attack this base. Although in the article, it indicates that there are U.S. and Israeli officials that say that Israel did notify the Trump administration ahead of time, but the Trump administration said it is, very concerned about what happened, and this is problematic for regional stability, and blah 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 blah. And of course, it does nothing. So that's where we are in terms of the sort of U.S., Israel, Syria, Turkey dynamic in a nutshell.
It,
That's the latest.
it seems to me that Israel is digging itself in a you know, we have a saying in Arabic, من حفر حفرة لأخيه وقع فيها. Whoever digs a hole for his brother, the one that digs the hole ends up falling in it. That's just the saying goes. But the Americans say, like, when you're digging a hole and you're in it and you didn't build your way out, you can't come out.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it seems like the
yeah.
hole's going deeper and deeper.
That's the saying in English, right, is when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, right? And that's how I think about the war in Iran, right? The US-Israeli war in Iran. That's how I think about it for the Trump administration. It's an utter failure, an utter disaster. We're in a hole. For God's sake, stop digging. Stop digging. Take the loss, before it gets even worse, right? You find yourself in a hole, stop digging. So, but to your point, yes, I mean, and I keep saying this, I mean, what the Israeli government is doing is, problematic for all the other actors involved, of course, for the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Syrians, Iranian civilians, like, yada, 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 the list goes on. But it's ultimately terrible for Israel. Anyone who really cares about Israel should recognize that it's terrible for Israel and that, the Netanyahu government has to go. That's a necessary but not sufficient condition, right? It is necessary. It absolutely must go, but that's not enough, right? There has to be pressure on whatever government comes next for a fundamental change.
Professor, is there any topic that you want to discuss that we haven't touched on yet?
I'm good. I'm good. I mean, thank you as always for having me. I mean, there's always more to talk about,
Yeah.
obviously. But I think we covered it pretty. I hope folks found this helpful. I think we covered a pretty good amount of territory.
I believe everyone found this very educational. I just wanted to make sure if there was a topic that was on your radar that we haven't discussed, that you would bring it up. Then, if you don't have a topic, if you have any other last words that you'd like to give the audience, the stage is yours.
I mean, first of all, again, it's a pleasure to be with you all, and I would just, I mean, that my last words would be to kind of go back and talk about something that we talked about much earlier in the conversation, which is, most Americans really don't follow foreign policy, certainly not in any depth. The fact that you all are here, that you follow Wajih, that you follow me, that you care about what's happening in the world, the Middle East, that's incredibly important. And that already puts you, a long way ahead of, a lot of other folks who just don't pay attention to this stuff. I wish they did. Let your friends and people know about Wajih and me, and get them to pay more attention because it's important. It's fundamentally important. Obviously, what's happening in terms of the US-Iran war is having a dramatic impact on all of us, and this stuff should be more important. I wish it were more important to our fellow Americans, and that they would pay a lot more attention. So hopefully, what Jiha and I are, providing a service in that regard, and we're happy to do it.
Thank you so much, Professor Debra Shushan. Thank you for all the audience that have come to join us and support the show and get educated. Please click on my name. You'll see the list drop down. You'll see the name of Professor Debra Shushan. Subscribe to her. If you were going to give me your dollars today, please hold on and give those dollars to Professor Shushan. I've gotten enough this month. I have enough support for the rest of the month. So I'm doing okay. So please go support the professor. She definitely needs your support. She is on the growing list. I made it to the bestsellers. We want to get her to become on the permanent bestseller. So please help us get her there. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're certainly watching a recording. Like, subscribe, and share. That also helps us more than you think. Do you have a YouTube account?
I don't, but I probably should, right?
You definitely should. If you have a Gmail account, then you already have a YouTube account. You can just set that up as a channel, and then there's a way where you can link your Substack directly to YouTube, and it just automatically uploads on its own for you.
All right. Well, we'll have to figure this out. I am of the generation of total ignoramuses when it comes to this sort of technology, blah, blah, blah. But, probably have to figure it out. So, yeah, thank
We
you
can get
once again.
the reason I say that is because we
Yeah.
can get you a second income from there as well.
So, probably something to look into. Wait, I
I,
learned it today.
yeah, I mean, this one, yeah, this is Tiny Hearts.
This is so cute. This is so cute. I love it. I love it.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you all for tuning in. I love your faces. And as always, remember, you may not fuck with politics, but politics will always fuck with you.
Yep.
That's just the honest truth. مع السلامة, bye bye, بالإنجليزي, goodbye. This was Get Informed with Waji. Have a good one.
مع السلامة. إلى اللقاء.
إلى اللقاء. مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.